I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now. Until the end.
Good evening, welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. I'm with you now. We're with you to the end. We always push off the end just a little bit, hoping it'll come much later. And sometimes we amaze ourselves at how many ends we've probably traversed and never noticed. But this is Conspiracy Cafe. This is why it is what it is, and this is why that channel is what it is, because nobody else will let it be said. No one else will speak it. No one else will connect the dots and just flat out tell you what the hell's going on in the world. And there's just so much going on in the world. It's just amazing. We can even keep ourselves sane and rational through the process. President Obama made a trip to Afghanistan. It's probably been a long time since he'd been to Afghanistan. The time before, when he was probably masquerading as Osama bin Laden, doing videotapes for the CIA. But he was welcomed home to the land in the sand to, I guess, claim that he's a veteran somehow and qualify for veterans benefits. Terrible shame. The whole drill process is just coming unglued in the near future. NORAD and US Northcom are conducting a drill called Ardent Sentry 2012. The North American Aerospace Defense Command and the US Northern Command will conduct major exercises between the 2nd of May and the 9th of May, focused on defense support of civilian authorities. We wonder, what do they have planned that they need that much support? Part of these exercises will be in North Dakota, Oregon, Texas, Alaska, Connecticut, Nova Scotia, as we do some naval maneuvers out that way. North Dakota will involve a simulated nuclear weapons incident at the Minot Air Force Base. And it's probably not the first time, but they're going to do a little training session there. So we have to watch with glee on whether or not we'll lose a nuke somewhere down the road. Oregon, the Oregon National Guard will do weather-related security events. Texas, U.S. Army North will deploy a military response to a major hurricane. Alaska, Joint Task Force Alaska will conduct coordinated response of a major aircraft crash in a remote area. And then, of course, Nova Scotia will be doing a U.S. Navy, Canadian Navy thing. Of course, the last one, Alaska, when you start talking about the major air crash disaster, something that did come up in Mexico was a filming of the Discovery Channel thing that crashed an airliner into the desert in Mexico. A Boeing 727 was deliberately crashed, full of crash test dummies, just to let all the emergency services know how to handle and what a aircraft crash of this nature would look like. And then, of course, assess injuries and all this. It's not like this is anything new. They say they haven't done anything like this in a long time as far as life-saving is concerned, which they don't seem to be the slightest bit interested in. The big thing about having a crash, at least a survivable crash on approach or takeoff, is to have the seats turned in the opposite direction so you face the rear, so that way when you impact you go back into the seat and don't go forward ripping your head off, as happens in a high impact crash. Remember the one here in Toronto and Malton way back when in the 70s, virtually, I think every body on the plane was decapitated, so you don't stand too much of a chance there to pilot with something like 30 or 40 feet underground. It was a big mess. If we can show this image on the screen here, these are the images of this 727 crash in the Mexican desert. The plane was torn in half. As we see both pieces there, it was like a toxic nightmare of debris to be cleaned up all over the place. There's film images. A helicopter was filming it. The pilot jettisoned prior to the crash, and then the baby just came down and pretty much skidded into the dirt there, breaking apart. And finally coming to a rest. So this is very ominous, because we have to wonder, what are our good-natured friends in the spook agencies prepared to do with all this information or this drill of what's going on. Are we going to have something coming down the road very, very soon where we're going to have an incident where a plane crashes, the pilot will bail out, and we'll have to deal with a major crisis of one sort or another to help bring in the New World Order? Will this be something timed for the Olympics? Of course, David Cameron is well on the road here to be prepared for the Olympics. This will probably be one of the most militarized Olympics that's ever occurred in human history, and probably makes the Berlin Olympics that Hitler had look like a cakewalk as far as a police state setup is concerned. And they're prepared too for plane crashes. They're going to shoot them down. So if we could show the screen here, we have fighter jets deployed, these Typhoon fighter jets. We have these Gatling gun things here that are just blow us to smithereens. We have snipers, we've got surface-to-air missiles. We got everything you could possibly need to start a small war with Iran, all going to be deployed around London. Now the big thing is, they're going to have more troops standing by in the Olympics, British military troops, than they have in Afghanistan. They're going to have 13,500 troops assigned to the Olympics. They got 7,500 guys in Afghanistan to fight a war. What the hell are you people thinking? And then when you add in the police mix and security forces and all that, it's going to a grand total of 23,700 people to police these games and provide so-called security. Like, this has to be absolute madness. Why anyone in their wildest nightmares would support this infrastructure of madness any longer just absolutely amazes and surprises me. I've given up on the Olympics many, many, many long years ago and could care less about them because they've been turned into a circus where the state now just seems to be flexing its police state muscles and just turning these things into some debauchery beyond belief. The warm-up shows are just absolute Luciferian delights. The Chinese show, I don't know if I ever got to show the Chinese Olympic video. I think I had a technical difficulty. Maybe I should dig that out again, because that just showed in effigy the 7/7 terrorist attack on the bus. They brought out this big float and it just kind of imploded to make it look like a bus blew up, and people danced in satanic versions around it. And this was supposed to be, British culture to show us the Olympics. And I'd have to say, that this leaves a whole lot to be desired here, because basically it just seems that you're celebrating human sacrifice. And there's just no mistake about it. Like, this is the monster of some type of, artwork that's been prepared for the Olympics. It's called the Accelerator Mittel Orbit, 115 meters, 377 feet high. Probably paid for by enormous funds from the British taxpayer. And a lot of people are just wondering, like, what the hell is this thing? So we see a nicer picture of it there. So they say, what is it? Twisted DNA. Some mangled caduceus, some bizarre form from the past. But this puppy is here at the Olympics. Compliments of the British taxpayer, I'm sure. And it just has all sorts of symbolism for something just flat out evil. And that's something to be concerned about. Another thing to be concerned about with this Olympics is the fact that they're going to pass regulations that you're not allowed to take any pictures. No photos. How they're going to enforce that, that's something people are really up in the air about, because they can't figure it out. But there'll be restrictions on the logos you can wear inside the Olympic Village. So you're not even free to dress in your own clothes, because it could offend, the great god Olympics. So somehow these people are going to monitor. Maybe they'll do something to shut down your cell phones or digital cameras so you can't take pictures. But that's something they're really trying to push, is that you cannot, like, who's going to go to the Olympics without wanting to take pictures? It goes beyond belief. Maybe you get yourself a free or for a fee something from surveillance video, but anybody goes on holidays anywhere, anytime is going to be taking pictures. So part of it, they come out with this, they get this anti-counterfeiting trade agreement coming into play and all this sort of thing to basically, turn you into some type of drone. Come here, let us shake all the cash out of your pockets, but you can't enjoy yourself, you can't do anything, you can't have any fun, you can't take any pictures, you can't have any mementos, you can't wear your own clothes, and if you just step out of line in the slightest way, we got snipers to blow your head off. why are we participating in this rut? So one of the sidebar articles that goes with this is power really corrupts. Scientists claim power is as addictive as cocaine. So levels of dopamine rise in your brain, and you get a reward system going that you feel, and it's very addictive. Well, there seems to be no doubt about that for a lot of these power mongers. The effects are the same in women and men, but some of the side effects are anxiety, paranoia, and restlessness. So society, paranoia, and restlessness. Well, that's very, very interesting. So what do we do with something like that? We have our leaders addicted to power, suffering from anxiety, paranoia, and restlessness. That sounds like the Olympics. So we need missiles, we have to deploy tanks, we're going to need fighter jets, the Royal Navy, snipers, everything, because we're just so paranoid. I don't think I've ever seen the world at any kind of level of paranoia. If the British troops had this type of equipment at Dunkirk, the invasion of France might have happened much, much sooner than just policing the Olympics. In the old days, you know, just maybe 1,000 London bobbies, unarmed, with just a little truncheon, could have kept the peace very, very easily. They seemed to do well enough cleaning up after the bombing raids. Other drills that are going on are drills at the top of the world, as we hear. NATO rehearses for war in the Arctic again. This is a regular drill in Norway. It's called Cold Response. Cold Response 2012. Probably would have gone unnoticed, except for one of Sweden's planes crashed, and that kind of upset the apple cart. So it's hardly talked about at all. But when you look into the fine details, this was the biggest drill or exercise they've had of this type, Cold Response. We talked about it a couple of years ago when they had one. But they look into high-intensity warfare, terror threats, and mass demonstrations. And then the author of this article that I have is going, what mass demonstrations are you going to have in the Arctic? Well, what's in Norway? The seed vault. If it hits the fan and people need seeds, they may do anything to get them. And you may see some mass demonstrations. They kept the countries participating secret as well. The armed forces of 15 countries were involved. Some of them that came out are, of course, the US, Britain, France, Canada, and the Netherlands. And other ones just kind of fell off the side. So some people have speculated Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and the Ukraine. But if we're doing all this wonderful stuff, why does it all have to be a secret? But one of the big secrets they're hiding up there is they have a giant base up there for the US Marine Corps. How many people thought, or even speculated, that the US Marine Corps has a giant underground facility in Norway? It's called the Bjugin Cave Facility on Norway's Fosen Peninsula. It's a land-based pre-positioning program. This 671,000 square feet of 6 climate-controlled caves, $420 million worth of Marine Corps equipment and supplies lie ready for real-world use. Now that's kind of bizarre, that in the middle of Norway, the Marines have this giant underground facility. But then, of course, the seeds are up there. They're probably worth fighting over. And then, of course, we'll be fighting over the resources of the Arctic in time. NATO has also established a joint warfare center in Stavanger. They call it the jewel in the crown of Allied command transformation. And as we transform from the old world order or present world order to a new world order, a lot of this stuff may come in handy. Or maybe all the rich people have their caves buried up there too, and the Marines are just going to guard them. Russian troops are doing drills in the United States. In the state of Colorado, they're going to do anti-terrorism drills between the 24th of May and the 31st of May. Russia's going to do drills, naval drills with China in the Yellow Sea, because they're probably not all that happy with a lot of things going on with the United States. Then there's another drill being done by Polish troops in Illinois, where they're seizing and confiscating firearms from American citizens. And the Russian drill might parallel a lot of this stuff as well. They're going to raid imaginary terrorist camps. And who are these imaginary terrorists? Well, they're probably American citizens that just say, hey, you stole my country. Come back. Hey, you just took my country. You're a terrorist. You asked a question. Committed a terrible thought crime. You just spoke out about the fact that your country's been stolen and all your rights and freedoms. How dare you? But the timing of this drill, which ends on the 31st of May, coincides with the start of the Bilderberg meeting in Chantilly, Virginia, which is going to start on the 31st and go to June 3rd. So just in case, there's a little bit of trouble up there, you got the Ruskies handy to lock and load and kick ass. That's where that video we have on our website that we've talked about before, America with a K, is well worth watching. It's about the communist, Russian specifically, takeover of the United States. Very, very, very telling. Very, very pertinent. When it first came out a long time ago, I just thought it was just too off the wall. That could never happen. Now I'm concerned it's already happened, and it's just a matter of connecting a few more dots before it's a complete fait accompli. They tell us all this stuff is, for our own safety, because there's all these evil people in the world. One of these evil groups is supposed to be Iran, and its leaders mocked tooth and nail by mainstream corporate media. So in one article we have here, which is mainstream corporate media too, BBC, but they tell the truth in 1 out of 1,000. Iran undecided on nuclear bomb. Israel military chief Lieutenant General Benny Gantz believes international diplomacy and sanctions are having an impact. He also said they haven't made their final decision on whether or not to build an atomic bomb. Well, you listen to our leaders and they said it, they decided years ago. The International Atomic Energy Agency said they have new evidence. But he says they don't. He ought to know. Of course, his bosses, Netanyahu, Defense Minister Barak, are big time wanting to start it up with Iran. One of the big reasons that we mentioned in a previous show, of course, that Netanyahu's brother was killed in the raid in Entebbe, and he has a lot of personal motives for just wanting to kill anybody and everybody to get revenge, I guess. He does not think Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, will take the final step. His belief is the Iranian leadership is composed of rational people. Man, we've never heard that anywhere. They all say that they want to wipe Israel off the map with that misquote that the Israeli government now admits, but is still repeated ad infinitum ad nauseum, that Iran's going to wipe them off the map, which was a complete red herring, a complete falsehood. The lie repeated so many times it makes you sick. The United States Air Force, in their checker game with Iran, has deployed F-22 fighter planes to the area, and also F-15C fighter planes. Units from the Massachusetts, Louisiana, and Okinawa to undisclosed locations in the Middle East, getting ready to whip it up. Some of these planes are there for fighter support as opposed to ground action. So they're going very, very hard and very, very fast to try to make this war into something. And that's just absolutely disgusting. And then, of course, we have to deal with the police state that they come up with. It must be common knowledge to most people who would listen to this forum because, you crave for something more and better. LA Airport TSA security screeners were running a drug ring. As if that's a big surprise. Happens all over the world in many different types of scenarios. But here we go. The more power that you give these people, the more open it is to abuse. And this happens all the time. So these people were taking payments, probably because they're not paid too much, of in the neighborhood of $2,400 to turn a blind eye to what's going across 22 different times. Now, of course, that's just drugs. What if these people decided to actually do something that's like terrorism motivated and spend $3,000 to get you to turn a blind eye to some terrorist equipment to get it on a plane? So that's what boggles my mind with a lot of these airports, is they hire people at the lower end of the pay scales, so that basically you're just making a subsistence living. You'd be well open to any types of bribes or influence. That's very common. And it's just trust the government. Everything we do is fine. Everything we do is fine. Everything you do is not fine. Virtually everything you've ever done is a lie. We've been lied to forever by these people who claim to be our representatives. They're not even good masters if we were slaves. They're terrible masters. They mislead us every way. Anytime you look at any issue, there's just nothing but stonewalling, shredding, concealing the truth. And what did Christ say? The truth sets you free. So if they're not prepared to set us free with the truth, then what are they doing? They're enslaving us. They don't want us to be free. They want us to be imprisoned in a thought shell. One story that's come up to support this as a pattern is the massacre of 24 Chinese villagers by British soldiers, the Scots Guards, in the Malayan campaign in 1948. They claim it's similar to the My Lai massacre of Vietnam War era, that they killed 500 people approximately back then, men, women, and children. At least these guys separated the men from the women and children and then shot them in cold blood. Seemingly there was some type of conflict where the British soldiers were killed ruthlessly by some communist aggressors, and they just retaliated by grabbing the first Chinese-looking people that they could find and shot them all to death. And of course, they were innocent. They worked at a rubber plantation, probably for not very much. And as we see in this Daily Mail article, the British government has consistently and effectively concealed in archive after archive, file after file, all the pertinent facts and data at the very beginning, and thereafter they just outright lied to any commission that looked into this to say it didn't happen as they saw it in reality. So colonial era documents were found at Foreign Office archives in Buckinghamshire. Some documents are being released, but the main files on what's called the Batang Kali massacre are still missing, and that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. It's just the way they do business. I worked with a guy a long time ago who was in the Malayan campaign. He was one of the senior constables I worked with, and he was a very unhappy man, and he drank a lot. Never late for work, but he drank a lot. And now I guess I know why. Because he probably had a lot of things that he wanted to forget and just couldn't, and the weight just bore down on him. See, there's no escape for you. You pull this kind of stuff, you got to live with yourself forever till the day you die. And it wasn't easy for him when that day came. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. One of the big articles for the Toronto Star in the modern era now, we can say, oh, that doesn't apply to us, that was a long time ago, was the Malayan thing. They even mention in that article too that in the Mau Mau uprising, President Obama's father was rounded up and tortured by British forces as a suspected communist insurgent. We don't want to say like father, like son. But the Toronto Star did a piece to go through police who lie, going right across Canada. Cops giving false testimony in court, caught, admonished by judges. Nothing happens to them much. A couple of police forces slapped a few hands and such like that, but it's a criminal offense, right? Now, if you lied, right, then they'd be, you'd be obstructing the police, you'd be obstructing justice, you'd be committing perjury, they'd be putting clamps on you for a long, long time. These guys do it, it's fun. We can say anything we want, do anything we want, because it just doesn't matter. There's no accountability because we're the arm of the state. So we can break all the laws that we're sworn to uphold with impunity and nothing matters, because even if we get caught, we can just go to the judge and go, so, they're lucky they got some of the judges that they get or something like that, because I think if I was a judge and you misled my court and you wanted to get me to convict an innocent man or woman, I would be rather pissed. And I think if I had enough evidence to lay a charge, I'd lay it myself. I'm a judge. I don't need to go to somebody else to do something. Where do the police go to get a warrant? They go to a judge, right? So what should the judge do? I'd be going to another judge and swear out an information for these guys to say that it's time to start investigating these people. A judicial inquiry led by a real judge. Or I'd hold them in contempt because, see, when you're the judge, you have total dictatorial control over the courtroom. So I think that would even be better, because then I don't need to bother to look for evidence or whatever. I just say, excuse me, son, you're lying to me. I'm holding you in contempt. Now I'm going to keep you in custody until you come back here and tell me the truth. It's very simple, right? If you were chewing gum in the court, the judge would throw you in the can for chewing gum. Say, hey, you're not supposed to chew gum in here. No talking. Don't do this. Don't do that. How about no lying? No lying. It's not allowed. You don't lie in my courtroom. You go sit in the cells until you figure out what the truth is, or you don't get out. You forgot to bring your notes? Well, don't worry. You sit in the cells until somebody finds them. If you're having a really tough time finding those notes, don't worry. At least we'll feed you. So many serious cases were thrown out, involving drug dealers with many charges against them and all this sort of thing because of police misconduct. Expert witnesses coming in and lying. A big operation going on in the Niagara region where the police just didn't want to reveal it was a Hamilton cop that gave a tip that got the ball rolling, so everybody went to court and lied. And the chief of police does nothing. Because what do we have? We have a completely corrupted systemic system of lying, cheating, stealing, killing, lying, manipulating. They couldn't tell the truth to save their lives. They definitely won't do it to save our lives. We have to take the initiative. Because all this lying, of course, takes us into the financial debacles. That's all our leaders do is lie. So we heard Deutsche Bank had a profit downfall. Feel sorry for them. The little violin comes out. Spain is in an enormous unemployment crisis. Their recession, which you really can't call it a recession, you got 25% people unemployed, that's a depression. Okay, you got almost half of young people unemployed. That's a depression. It's not a recession. It was a recession probably 10 years ago, but they lied and you didn't know. You just pretended. Now they call it a recession, but it's really a depression. And when they call it depression, that would mean it'd be a total economic collapse. Their credit rating has been downgraded to BBB+. They're just above junk bond status soon. In the first quarter of this year, 365,900 people lost their jobs. There's 5.6 million unemployed Spaniards. That's just not sustainable. And it's going to spread. With globalization and all the other lies, this is going to spread. Another article, Eurozone crash, Dutch government collapse, Czech government on the verge of collapse, Russian stock market halted for a couple of days. That could have been a technical error. But we're just seeing, in more and more of these countries that you just can't live borrowing money anymore, especially money that's created out of thin air and really has no intrinsic value other than the fact it's paper. This game is going to fall apart very, very soon. There's a big protest in Quebec all the time. Our students are really upset. The tuition fees are rising, and we have to face facts that we've overspent for pretty much all of my lifetime, if not more. We haven't paid anything back. We're in debt up to our eyeballs. I had a big graph in the Toronto Sun. I didn't bring it with me because I was worried about the rain, but it just showed the provincial debt curves. It's getting up there. I think it ended up at $650 billion. And there's virtually no hope of ever paying that back. And you have to pay more and more compounding interest. That's why they're keeping the interest rates at life support, because if they were at any reasonable rate, we would have collapsed years ago. In fact, we did collapse years ago, but that's another story. So these students no one's ever told them the hard facts of life, that these fiat money systems don't work. So you go to university, a lot of them might be economics students. And you're going to get a useless degree to work in a system that's completely fraudulent and false, that doesn't work, and is going to fall apart soon. And then you're going into the streets to fight with the government to get a bigger share of the mistake. Darwin Awards, all around. Paper money without any intrinsic value is relatively worthless. Borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and printing money is a recipe for disaster. It always has been. It's just a matter of time to wait until we finally get to that tipping point. And when we reach there, there's just no escape anymore unless you've made your own lifeboat. One of the British articles that go with this, £5 trillion burden for state sector pensions. $5 trillion is what they have to pay. We did something on pensions in some of the U.S. states. Most of them were smaller states. This is the United Kingdom. 98% of the money will come out of taxpayers' pockets. Nothing in there. 3.8 trillion pounds for state pension payouts, 1.2 trillion pounds to go to retired doctors, teachers, and civil servants. The burden per family will be 180,000 pounds times 2.2, so it's 36, almost 400,000 bucks. Give me the 400,000 bucks, keep your pension. I'll keep my money, and I don't need to have your pension. Use it properly and I can have something to retire on. This is absolute insanity. So as more and more people come to retirement age, there just isn't going to be anybody at the bottom to be able to make these payments unless you give them everything you got times 2 or 3 even. One of the big mistakes is they never put, or they used to put, but they changed, at least in Canada, and it says they did the same thing here, is they put the state pension money, contrary to popular belief, where they thought they'd put it in a special pool or account or investment so that it's there as an asset. No, they put it into general revenue. Well, there is no general revenue. General revenue is a bottomless pit, paying interest on debt forever. So there is no asset there. We did the same thing in Canada where we started investing the money in the markets. And I'm sure we're down a bottomless pit or two. So then they say something that I like to hear. The smart money is on making sure you have your own pot of savings to look after yourself. Your own. Babies born in 2012 in the United Kingdom will not get their state pension until they reach 80, as if that's going to happen. I think we'll be seeing the bottom of the bowl very, very soon, but if that's the case, hopefully you have a longer lifespan. So they're going to up the ages for their pension for both men and women to 66 by 2020, 67 by 2028. Basically, I think it's probably too little too late. There's no way in hell that they're ever going to be able to meet those obligations in the very short order. And what are some of the consequences of this? Like we see in Greece, we have a giant spate of suicides. Greece has always had one of the lowest suicide rates. Now they're getting, not just that people are killing themselves, but there's showplace suicides, where people shoot themselves in a public square or do other things. One guy hanged himself from a lamppost in Athens and such like this, where we see people are just totally giving up because they can't get a lifestyle that they've been hoping for, or they lose a lifestyle that they had. One gentleman was an older gentleman. He says, I'm not going to spend my golden years. I think he was 77 already, but he lost his business and he wasn't going to end up rummaging through garbage cans. And of course there's a stigma where the Orthodox Church refuses to bury people who commit suicide. I don't really think in some respects that you committed suicide, is you were driven to madness and insanity by these bailouts, bankers raping and robbing you. You're not a suicide, you're a victim that deserves Christian compassion. And I don't see that there's anything wrong that you would be buried in so-called hallowed ground. The whole planet is hallowed ground. It's God's creation that He gave us to live on. And there's no difference between that plot of earth and another plot of earth, except maybe one's a church cemetery and one's not. It's all going back to dust, where we came from. And we might as well go with the prayers and influence of our fellows in a church-like setting. It's the only decent thing to do. So that's one thing I would be at odds with some of the denominations that say, you know, we won't help these people out. Well, we didn't help them out. That's why they killed themselves. If we would have made sure that they had a standard of living and some dignity, maybe we wouldn't have come to that. I take it as a firm responsibility to try to help people in need whenever I can. I even take the odd one in to live with me to have shelter from the storm. People who can't look after themselves, whether through accident, illness, or in the present circumstances, I have someone living with me with mental illness. Well, you just can't throw these people into the street. It's part of the Christian faith to look after your brothers and sisters and try to make it right. It's not an easy thing to do, but nobody said it was easy. Except the media, when they lie. The governments that lie. And one of the big lies, I was lucky to be able to get it written and posted on our website, conspiracy-cafe.com.org.net, compliments of Brother John. But this was an article I saved to the end of my reading material for today. And of course, this was probably one of the most important and pertinent ones. When we had the last little financial debacle in the United States, virtually all the Canadian banks failed, but nobody told you. It's a secret. So I always liked the picture that I posted at the front of the blog. That was from a classic old movie, Who's Minding the Mint? It's a comedy about some people who break into the mint and try to steal some money. Hilarious, but a great image. And, you know, you see the boat. The boat's grossly overloaded. Looks like it's going to sink. George Washington is in it. Makes it look like he's crossing the Delaware. And, of course, the Federal Reserve had to bail out the Canadian banks. So it's appropriate, I guess, that George Washington would be in the boat that crosses the Delaware or the Rubicon. But this was never reported to us. Well, you can take away the picture now. I'm just going to read from the text. It was kept like a giant state secret. And I can see why, because they don't want to create panic. You know, it's just like you're on the Titanic, the boat's going to sink. You don't want to tell everybody right away because, you know, everybody's just going to go absolutely berserko, maybe. But one of the biggest things it would induce would probably be a run on the banks. So I remember talking to the lady who does my hair, and she was telling me, you know, she's in a small business, struggling and all this sort of thing, but her bank manager told her to get all her money out of the bank. Like, you know, like basically there is no bank. And I go, wow, you know, that's probably very sage, pertinent advice. Or most of them would just lie and say, give me all your money. Because they don't have it anyway. It's just gone down that big dark, ooh, it's gone. So it's like I've said many times to people about, you know, why I do some of the things I do and think the way I think. All your assets are like this. It's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Of course, you know, it's going to say numbers on there. You got this account, this value, that value. But basically what you got is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It's not even cash. And it says, you know, you got money. So these banks all went under. So that in the mortgage test, they call it holding water, like you're underwater. So 3 of the major Canadian banks were actually underwater. CIBC, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, Bank of Montreal, and Scotiabank were underwater. Completely gone. TD and Royal Bank, well, they fared a little better, but they were past the point of no return. So then the bailouts had to start. They don't call them bailouts. So this was like an increase in liquidity, right? When you're sinking in a boat, the last thing you need more liquidity, right? So the banks, which reported profits of $27 billion between October 2008 and June 2010, all of a sudden we're up the creek without a paddle. U.S. Federal Reserve gave $12 billion to Scotiabank, $8 billion for TD and RBC, $3 billion for CIBC and Bank of Montreal. The Bank of Canada chipped in $41 billion. So all in all, when you added up everything, they also got $69 billion from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, where all mortgages are registered. They sold off $69 billion worth of mortgages to raise more money. And these were performing mortgages, not non-performing mortgages that are still making profits or for CMHC. But what we paid for this was, we paid 150% of what the CIBC Bank was worth. We paid 118% of what Bank of Montreal was worth. We paid 100% for Scotiabank. So at least in Britain, when they bailed out their banks, the government to some extent kept the banks. We paid 69% of what TD was worth, 63% of what Royal Bank was worth. And here we have a cute little picture of the printing press. This is from the same movie. We coined the picture before, Who's Minding the Mint? They get in there and watch the, they just use the machine to do some quantitative easing to take some money home, but the way everybody looks in awe at the printing press is just a glorious picture. But basically all our banks were worth a plugged nickel. That's a nickel with a hole shot in it. We knew it was bad. We said it on this show before when Scotiabank was selling their main corporate tower for $1 billion in downtown Toronto. So we have, you know, the bank is for sale in effigy in this cartoon. So you lose the house, you lose the bank. These banks are like giant phallic symbols for these people to sell one of their big office towers, especially in the big contest they had to build them in the first place. It's just sacrilege. Sacrilege. But they also posted on the website conspiracy-cafe.com a link to gold coin. Click that and it explains the history of precious metal money. Money that has its own intrinsic value because of the content of the precious metals in the coin. That's why they're taking them all out. All our coins are worthless. Which is something I've said many, many times. What my grandfather told me, when they change the money, it means it's over. But that Roman gold coin, even though there is no Rome, it's long gone. That emperor is just toast. I don't even know if anybody knows who he is, and I probably can't even pronounce his name without looking back at Wikipedia to try to figure it out. But that coin contains gold, and it's still valuable today, that you can trade that for, you know, the 1,600 and something bucks an ounce that gold is. So if we take a wild shot in the dark that say it's an ounce, that's, you know, 1,640, 50 bucks. Still today, even though there is no Roman government, you can't take money like paper money from an ancient civilization. Or if you look at, you know, the history of coins, somebody made one out of stones where you got this giant wheel that looks like it could go on one of those big trucks that serve a mine in the Arctic or something like that. It's worthless. It's just a stone. Had maybe great value in its day, in its civilization, but it's just a rock. So it doesn't have the intrinsic value that gold or silver or other precious metals, even in the smaller coins, like copper, nickel, would have. At least they have some value. So the big thing would be, you know, for the banks, these Canadian banks, is where they used to have a saying, you know, brother, can you spare a dime? They got to go around saying, hey, brother, can you spare 100 billion? Well, even that, 114 billion. So we need it. We went under. What are part of the reasons we go under? We have companies like Google, or pardon me, Apple, not paying taxes. So they get in all kinds of complicated tax dodges where they're in different countries under different names, or even in different states. Like they have like a little office that's smaller than the studio here at that channel, set up in Nevada, so that they don't have to pay certain types of taxes. So it's just a small office, a desk or two, some phones, and they get out of things like capital gains tax or you know, some other corporate taxes and such like that. So it's brilliant strategies. Or they make a deal with other countries where they just pay a flat rate of greatly reduced taxes. So instead of 30-something% they would pay in the States. One of the examples is 9 or 10% paying out of Ireland or Liechtenstein or whatever. In Nevada it's only 8.84%. So by not having this money to go into the tax coffers, well, of course, things fall apart. One of them is the school that most of the people who work for Apple, including its founder, went to. You have to lay people off. They're cutting classes because they just can't afford anything anymore. They just have a giant black hole of debt like everybody else. So part of it is just greed. It's just pure, flat out greed. There's nothing to share, nothing to give, because these people are just basically soulless droids that love money. Because the gift you get from giving isn't on a cost-benefit analysis chart. You get a blessing. God gives you a blessing for giving. And that blessing manifests itself down the road. So everything you do that you give is blessed. And that's something they can't understand. So you look at these banks. How many people did they nail to the wall over many debt issues? Probably thousands, tens of thousands. No blessings in that. And then one day it was pretty much their testicles are on the chopping block. Because they're almost, well, not almost, they were completely insolvent. And they had to depend on the charity of other places to bail them out or increase their liquidity, as they said. So maybe that's a blessing that will figure itself out somewhere along the line and save us from some of the crises that are coming, because these next crises will be overwhelming. And one man that I really like, who says it the best, is Nigel Farage, European Union MEP from Britain. He is just the master stroke. So let's get him going. He talks fast. He's great.
Now we'll hear from Mr. Farage on behalf of the FD Group.
Thank you. It's a great shame Mr. Van Rompuy is not here, because a month ago he told us the worst was over, we'd reached the turning point. He even told us that he'd solved the euro crisis. Well, today we've got a more realistic Mr. Barroso, who says if we follow his policies and stick together, we can solve this in the end. Sorry, no one believes you anymore, and actually, in the face of the rapidly deteriorating situation, these comments look ridiculous. In Spain, mass unemployment gathers by the day, and internal democracy in Spain is now under threat. In Italy, where we were told Mr. Monti would sort it all out, growth figures are falling and the bond spreads are worsening. And now an IMF official has come out and said that it is obvious that at some point a euro breakup will happen. These are big changes. The euro is doomed. And your policies, sir, even if Greece accepts the austerity you're putting upon them, even if for the next 8 years they obey all of this, they will still in 2020 have a debt GDP ratio of 120%, which makes one ask, what is the point? And in Spain, if Spain was able to increase, the difference is, sir, Britain is not trapped inside the economic prison of the euro. Now take this, if Spain was to increase, if she increased her productivity growth by 0.5% a year, which at the moment looks unlikely, if Spain did that, it would take her 40 years to close the competitiveness gap with Germany. These countries were sucked in to a totally false economic boom with artificially low interest rates, and they are now paying the price. These policies cannot succeed. Mercifully, outside of this institution, economists the world over now say it is inevitable that the euro will break up. It is just a question of how, and I really hope that the IMF now decide to stop pouring good money after bad into these bailouts, and I really do hope that not one penny piece more of British taxpayers' money goes into propping something up that should be allowed to die.
I mean, you just gotta love that guy, because he just lays it on the line in just short, matter-of-fact facts. And then the big thing is, did you look at the other people? These other European useless bureaucrats, all with these stunned looks on their faces, or just that dumb smile. There's only one guy in the place, pretty much, that you could probably trust with the keys to the store, and that's Nigel. Like, in a way, he should just be elected El Presidente for life. They tried to whack him once in a plane crash, too, so, you know, he's one of those politicians that comes in under George's law. You can only trust the ones with a bullet hole in them, or in his case, survived the plane crash. All the rest of them, they're just thieves, liars, thieves. Just sitting there with that dumb European look on their face. It's disgusting. One day you'll be eating dirt. You'll never know about these smug pieces of crap that put you in a situation like that. So Brussels is ordering Whitehall in the UK to fly the European Union flag. They say, well, you know, we're paying stuff in your general direction. You got to fly that rag, and if you don't fly it, then they're going to fine you. That's the government and government institutions in the UK. So some of it's still up in the air, not the flag. They say, well, even anything we do for you, like if you do it on the internet or on TV, you got to do it in like another European Union language. Like, I'd pick the most obscure language known to mankind if I had to. There must be some rare Gaelic accents that no one understands except 5 or 6 old people who are drunk. that you could do that. And if I had to fly that European Union flag, well, it would be in the men's room first. And after you wipe your ass with it a few times, then we put it up the flagpole. Because it's just an abomination. A total abomination. Some of the good news is there's a law firm in the United States doing a class action suit called Spire Law Group. And they're going after these bailout artists. So this lawsuit alleges the largest money laundering network in the United States history has taken place. Homeowners across the country filed a mass tort in the Supreme Court of New York, County of Kings. Every major bank, servicer, and their subsidiaries are on the lawsuit. Some of these subsidiaries are in the Cayman Islands, the Isle of Man, Luxembourg, Malaysia. The Obama administration has been named as encouraging loan modifications for homeowners. It was privately ratifying formation of shell companies in violations of the United States Patriot Act and state and federal law. Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Citigroup, One West Bank, and numerous other federally chartered banks stole hundreds of millions of dollars of homeowners' money during the last decade and then laundered it through offshore companies. See, that's why they sit there with those smug looks on their face, and that's why they never do anything for you while they're holding public offices, because they robbed you blind and sent it offshore. And they know that because they control everything, and they lie that they own the police, they own the military, they own the system in totality, that there's really no place for you to go. So I'm really surprised that they were able to get this even before a court. So they say there's laundering of billions or trillions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer money, the wrongful taking of homes from taxpayers, and that this was expressly supported by the administration. The administration ignored its own agency's reports, including the Department of Homeland Security, about this situation as far back as 2010. So that's like the captain on the Titanic too. You know, you got all these guys going, iceberg warning, sir, iceberg warning, sir. And you just ignore it, throw the reports away, until one day somebody screams out, you know, iceberg dead ahead, sir. And you whack into this puppy, you're down and out for the count. Then there's this other beast. Not that the European Union needs more beasts, but that has come up. That's talking about the European Union collapse. This is stuff that you just don't see in the paper, don't hear about, don't understand about. But this is very well done. It's something that has to come into the forum.
Are the European Union and its common currency facing a crisis? What can and should be done? The EU is planning a new treaty called the European Stability Mechanism, or ESM. A treaty of debt. Members of Parliament all have access to the draft legislation. The authorized capital stock shall be 700 billion euros. Question: why 700 billion? Where did that number come from? And by whom and on what basis was it calculated? ESM members hereby irrevocably and unconditionally undertake to pay on demand any capital call made on them within 7 days of receipt of such demand. Question: nothing really. That part is clear. If the ESM needs money, we have 7 days to pay. Taking normal bank processing times into account, that means we have 4 days to write a check. But what does irrevocably and unconditionally mean? What if we have a new parliament, one that doesn't want to transfer money to the ESM? Do we have to pay anyway? The Board of Governors may decide to change the authorized capital and amend Article 8 accordingly. Question: pardon me? 700 billion is just the beginning? The ESM can stock up the fund as much as it wants to, any time it wants to? And we would then be required, under Article 9, to irrevocably and unconditionally pay up? The ESM shall have full legal capacity to institute legal proceedings. The ESM, its property, funding, and assets shall enjoy immunity from every form of judicial process. Question: so the ESM program can sue us, but we can't challenge it in court? The property, funding, and assets of the ESM shall be immune from search, requisition, confiscation, expropriation, or any other form of seizure, taking, or foreclosure by executive, judicial, administrative, or legislative action. Question: immune from judicial action was covered in the last point. But this means neither our governments, nor our legislatures, nor any of our democratic laws have any effect on the ESM organization? That's a pretty powerful treaty. Governors, alternate directors, alternate directors, the managing director, and staff members shall be immune from legal process with respect to acts performed by them, and shall enjoy inviolability in respect to their official papers and documents. Question: so anyone involved in the ESM is off the hook? They can't be held accountable for anything? And does the inviolability of their papers mean we can't destroy them, or that we won't even be allowed to see what's been written? The treaty establishes a new intergovernmental organization to which we are required to transfer unlimited assets within 7 days, if it so requests. An organization that can sue us but is immune from all forms of prosecution, and whose managers enjoy the same immunity. There are no independent reviewers, and no existing laws apply. Governments cannot take action against it. Europe's national budgets in the hands of one single, unelected, intergovernmental organization? Is that the future of Europe? Is that the new EU? A Europe devoid of sovereign democracies? Is that what you want?
It's probably not what you want. You probably don't even know you're getting it. I never heard of this before. I was just lucky one of the girls sent it to me, and when you get around to watching it, like, your hair turns color. So you can see now where this law firm, Spires, is going after these people for looting all this money and such. Well, when you have a treaty like this one is, they can just suck all this money out, and you have absolutely no recourse to know even what happened. You just have to pay. That's got to be one of the most bizarre types of laws that you could possibly imagine. You know, we're not going to get into the gun control part this exact moment, but can't you see why they want all the guns? Because they're taking all your money. It's a stick up. Stick them up. And people still fall for this crap. Like, wake up, smell the coffee. So of course, you know, there's always this stuff too that, you know, there's the knight and the white horse who's going to come and save us and all this sort of thing. We're going to have a new financial system and all that kind of stuff. Well, that may be all well and good. Maybe it's true one way or another. It's difficult to say. But I know I just have to go with my instincts, and my instincts tell me no. So one of the little pieces I wrote, because one of the biggest, you know, people going around about this is someone with no name, who's called Drake, who's trying to say that, you know, there's these good white knights who are going to come to the rescue and arrest all these evil guys. And, you know, I do this tongue-in-cheek by bringing out Daffy Duck as Duck Drake, you know, going to save the world and tell everyone we're safe. It's just, it's too much to believe. It's just too good to be true. When you see the treaty that's written in the European Union, that they can suck all the money out of your pockets, there's no way that you can believe there's this mysterious good force. This, to me, looks like a classic psychological warfare operation. So our Duck Drake is going to go to the police and, you know, officer, we're going to arrest all these people and I'll pacify the public by putting out a good cock and bull story. This is just classic disinformation to get you to tone it down. So in his little synopsis, which I have here, you know, he gets all kinds of things, like the people being arrested are bad, the people doing the arresting are good. And the way this is written out is that they're trying to force you to do something that you wouldn't naturally do, to stand down, kind of like a stand down order for 9/11. The other thing that just goes completely and totally against the grain is the fact that they would release information like that prior to it happening. You never, in a military operation, tell your enemy when you're going to attack, and you never, in a law enforcement scenario, tell the arrestee that he's going to be arrested. It's got to be a surprise. It's for safety. That's like a cardinal sin to do that. So basically why I pick some of these cartoon characters is because their faces look good. They just want you to sit back, relax. These are psychological operations, and the fact that psychological operations are being used against us should make us scream. Because we the people, Americans especially, have to get involved. Like 1776, you need people getting involved. The only way that you're ever going to know it's a real arrest, a real revolution, is when you see them storming the Bastille, as in the last image where the French people rose up and stormed the Bastille. Then you know it's real. As Tom Morello, the man who introduces our show with his song, he had another song where he had lyrics. You and I are missing persons until we're counted in the streets. And if there's going to be mass arrests, unless we're there to supervise and control it, it's not going to be a we the people thing. It's going to be some other form of tyranny sidestepping we the people, as we're always sidestepped. That's not what it is. It's not, you've got to lead it yourself, we the people. Yes, other saying is, if you take a step towards freedom, it'll take 2 steps towards you, which is the opposite of the Communist Manifesto type sayings. That's the one that, Obama was trying to pass some type of regulation where you can't use child labor on farms, so children of farm-being couples can no longer work on the farm. And then he backed down. That's the communist one. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So he got in a lot of his other regulations about having a commercial driver's license, it appears, to operate farm equipment, where that's never been the case. You always have the right to go on a road, because people realized since the time of the invention of anything with an engine that you need food to eat. And the people that grow this food have to have some special privileges so that they can get around and do the work. The other thing is it teaches children. You have to learn how to work. If we wait till you're 18, you'll never have learned how to work. And then you're useless. I worked in the family business when I was 10 years old. Didn't have a problem with it. It was good fun. Gave me a lot of character. Simple things geared to what my age was, but it was nice to participate in this. It's very important. One of the things happening in some of the other countries, they're still having conflicts with mining companies where protesters, generally indigenous native people, are shot down and killed. So one of them, there was a lot of big marches going on. Some of them are almost communist oriented, so that bothers me. But this chap, Bernardo Vacaz, was shot and killed protesting a mining company. So these protests are going on quite a lot in Latin America. Seemingly they have something called World Water Day, March 22nd, 322, Skull and Bones Day, International Day of Peasant Struggle on April 17th. I'm sorry I missed that one. That one would have been good. Could have had a Schützenfest on that day. Peasant struggle. I always like the word peasant, because that's what I'd rather be king of, the peasants, rather than the elites. They should just be put in a mine and you seal it shut. But the Conga mine, $4.8 billion project of Newmont Mining Corporation and the Peruvian company Minas Buenaventura, second largest gold mine in the world, will affect 5 sources of drinking water, because they use arsenic a lot of times in getting this gold out. It's not too good to put in the water supply. So of course the governments create states of emergency so that they can hammer everybody down, beat them up, terrorize them, and knock them down. One of the objects that these protests and a lot of these people are doing in different Latin countries with these various protests is to get to decriminalization of social protests, and that's very important. Surviving political censorship and intimidation. You have a right to a counter opinion, even if it's one I don't like. And there's nothing wrong with that, because maybe we're wrong. Sometimes we need some counter opinion to have some more facts brought to the table so we can do it right. But like I say, my concerns are with a lot of the organizations mobilizing these people is they're extremely leftist, and no much better than the rightists who run the mine. Everybody wants the power and control, drug flowing through their veins. There's a big effort in the United States to get rid of the county sheriff. And this is a very, very dangerous and upsetting precedent. The state of Delaware is passing laws to take away the powers of arrest of the sheriffs. Not that they have a whole lot of them, there's only 3 counties, but this is the start, because the sheriff is elected and he has complete and total law enforcement authority. You take him away, you no longer have an elected local head of law enforcement. Now you're going to have the state or the federal government bringing in a much lower standard and a much more oppressive force. Bigger is not better. If you something they did here in Ontario a lot of times, they took away a lot of our small town police departments and they were just gobbled up by our provincial police or formed into a larger regional force. So you lose your local police commission, which could be like your neighbor, your sister, your brother, people you know who aren't going to oppress their neighbors. And then they turn it into some monstrous bureaucracy where you can lie hand over foot. And unsuspectingly, just to save a few bucks here or there, you got suckered into this and you lost all control over local law enforcement. Big mistake. One you'll pay for dearly. It's not the first time they've tried this stuff. They tried it in the 1970s in California, but luckily they can put stuff on the ballot. And that move was arrested, and they still have their sheriffs. In 1935, Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to eliminate all 48 states that they had at the time and form 9 regional governments that would operate as extensions of the federal government. All local law enforcement would be eliminated. The plan failed. Thank God for that. It was an insidious stealth plan on the part of some within the federal government to take away the right of the people and the states to elect their own law enforcement and to vastly strengthen the hand of numerous federal agencies throughout America. That's something that just doesn't get talked about too much in the history books, because the next step after you federalize law enforcement is to internationalize law enforcement. And then when those Russian and Polish troops are here, they can have full police powers and kick your ass real good as they're seizing your Second Amendment rights. So of course there's expansions in the Obama administration. IRS is going to need 16,500 new employees to implement Obamacare. $500 million was sent to the IRS to enforce the new health care law. A lot of these agents are violating people's private property rights because you don't have any private property rights. They're taking it all. They're stripping the whole planet of anything and everything that has value, and in the end, you will be eliminated and sent back to the dust. There is only one hope, one chance in the United States. Unfortunately, it's a slim chance because they control the voting machines, which have been rigged, and they are controlling the mass dissemination of information. But the only candidate who even comes close to having a solution for not just the United States of America, but the whole planet Earth is Ron Paul. And if he isn't President of the United States at the next one, I would have to say you're doomed. Completely and totally doomed. He has to be given the presidency. If it's okay for Obama to lie and falsify documents, then it's probably okay to put Ron Paul on your shoulders and have millions of people just carry him into the White House and trample anyone who gets in their way. Because you will be fighting for your very life if the next twit gets in there. Whether he starts a war that brings on Armageddon, or they just set up a treaty like in the European Union to strip all the value and assets out of anything and everything and leave you to rumble in the dirt until you die. Those will be your options. Ron Paul has some different options. Repealing the Federal Reserve Act, which he calls treasonous. Very, very important. End the war on drugs. Very, very important. Because this is something our idiots just don't seem to understand. It's lesson 1 in economics. Everything has a supply and a demand curve. Everything. It is a law, the law of supply and demand. There is absolutely nothing you can do to overwhelm those laws. They exist as mathematical certainties. So anything you do to try to ban something is against the law of supply and demand. It can't happen. It's a complete impossibility to do that. The only thing you can do is create a massive crisis, and the one in Mexico is just so disgusting. I believe it's like 50,000 people have been killed in the war. See, we're killing 50,000 innocent people primarily because we want to save people from drug use. How many people, the people who were used the drugs died anyway from drug abuse. We killed 50,000 extra ones. For what? insanity. Total insanity, because you're trying to do something that is completely and totally impossible. It's like trying to repeal the law of gravity, to say, you may not fall down. Anyone who falls down will be put to death. Anyone who allows someone to fall down will be put in prison for 1,000 years. Well, people are going to fall down. It's gravity. Gravity works all the time. You can't make a law that supersedes the law of gravity. How can you make a law that supersedes the law of supply and demand? It's insane. Stop corporate welfare. So most of these bailouts aren't going the way they're supposed to go, as we've discussed. He wants to end them. A wise move. Bring the troops home. Definitely. Because these wars are wars for corporations, for their fun and their profit. They're not wars for freedom or liberty. Reform the monetary system. Get out of this fiat money system the Federal Reserve has. It's a joke. It's a fraud. Give me a bag full of them Roman coins. I'll take them. Restore individual liberty. It's another video hopefully I can do Tuesday night, because we'll be back Tuesday night to follow my schedule, that I saw on liberty that was just absolutely amazing, to just talk about how the United States failed and went bankrupt and such. But as a we the people, you have sovereignty. You're like a sovereign citizen. The state isn't supposed to herd you like cattle and flog you when you get out of line. It's not the way it's supposed to be. So taking all sorts of steps and eliminating these espionage communications laws and establishments, whether you're going on a plane and being frisked. Like, I love watching old movies when you see somebody going on a plane and they just walk onto the plane. And we're like, wow, it's too bad I was too young to fly back then, and maybe it wasn't even around in some of those things, but you actually walked on the plane. The freedom you had. Yes, freedom comes with risk, but I'd rather be free than to be at the beck and call of these tyrants who get off on abusing us. Stop foreign aid, because most foreign aid goes to feed big corporations, and nothing really goes to the person at the bottom end. They pretend they're helping them, but they basically steal all the money. Repeal the Patriot Act and the NDAA. Have health freedom. We get sucked into having GMO foods, MSG, fluoride-laced water, cigarettes, Oxycontin, alcohol. That's all okay, but if you have milk, you're a criminal. And then, of course, with repealing drugs, you get medical marijuana. And marijuana that can be used to make fuel. Originally, the diesel engine wasn't to run on diesel fuel. It was to run on the oil from the marijuana plant. That's one of the big reasons why it was banned. End income tax. Because once you're free of these taxes, you're free to spend, and the economy is free to prosper. And you don't need all this stuff from the government because you're earning enough of your own. One of the big things about not being in debt, and I guess maybe I didn't fall asleep in my economics class, but there's something called the balanced budget multiplier. And it's a stimulus to the economy when you have a balanced budget. That means you're not in debt. So imagine wherever you are, whoever you are, that instantly you're no longer in debt when your next paycheck comes. There's no mortgage to pay, there's no loans, nothing. You have a complete, open, balanced budget. Everything you get on your next check is for you. How are you going to live? Damn good. How would your country get by if the debt slate was clean? Damn good. Party time. Which they don't want you to have. Stephen Harper, our Duce in residence here in Canada, in Ottawa, says the same thing. He doesn't see how the war on drugs is working. It's not working. Quite correct, Mr. Harper, because you can't do something that's scientifically and mathematically impossible. And that's why you can't run the economy, because you don't even know the basic building blocks of economics. You just bring in some professor who knows high-end math, and he babbles a little bit, and you sign the papers, and we go down the drain. And then we get to our gun control issue, I guess. Trayvon Martin raised $200,000. Or pardon me, George Zimmerman raised $200,000 on his website for his legal defense in the shooting of Trayvon Martin. Of course, everybody's up in arms because they want his money. Well, the money was given by private people for his personal defense because they believe in what happened in his cause, as opposed to the gangbanger child's photographs that are airbrushed and propagandized beyond belief. A lot of people have seen through that, and he has the right to that money for his legal defense. He is charged with a crime. He is not convicted. And he shouldn't be convicted because it's all just a giant witch hunt. Germany starting its gun registry. Canada sort of almost got out of its. But the Germans are doing something that should just send shivers down your spine. They're starting a gun registry, not just of the guns in Germany, but they're starting a gun registry for all the guns in Europe. Didn't they do that once before? Yes, they did, in the 1930s. So in 1938, they had a giant central database on all the firearms. They confiscated the firearms of the Jews and the people they wanted to kill first, and then they had a whole lot easier time. So this is the gun control. We see the 3 German guys sitting there on the bench. Gun control, yeah, one of the first things we did. And this time they'll win because they're going to do it again. And you're going to get sucked into it. Even the people who are proponents of this saying the gun registry wouldn't necessarily prevent another massacre because they had some kind of school shooting as well in 2002. So in one of the shootings that they use is this, is, you know, one chap faked documents to get a license and the other guy had a gun that was registered already anyway. So nothing would have changed. But the big thing is they use these as excuses to lure in the people who can't think too swiftly for themselves to bring in the new future police state. How do we know this? We have a prime example with Eric Holder, Operation Fast and Furious. So a CBS article, which is just surprising, talks about Republican congressmen who are holding this guy's butt to the flame, saying something's got to come out of this. This guy set up a massive intelligence operation to supply Mexican drug dealers with thousands of guns so that they could come back and kill Americans, including American law enforcement officials probably too, and that we could blame it on American citizens because they have the right to possess firearms. So they were purposely planting these guns on the most heinous killers of all, thousands of them. And there's thousands of pages of records on this that they want to hold him in contempt so Congress can get these records to analyze. Of course, the Democrats say it's a witch hunt. No, it isn't. It's justice. We don't hunt this witch. We burn him at the stake. He gave away tons of guns to the most deviant criminals we can imagine in Mexico, to perform all types of abuse. No wonder there's 50,000 casualties in this drug war. Fatalities. Casualties are probably way more. When we look at people who are injured or burned out or stressed out from these events, it's just absolutely heinous. This man should be in prison for the rest of his life. Actually, burning him is probably better. Then, of course, we have another heinous crime. We had the colleague of David Kelly, Richard Holmes, killed in a very similar way, where he goes out for a walk. He worked at Porton Downs as a scientist. Kelly did the sexing up or juicing up of the documents that went to justify the war in Iraq for the British government. It was all a lie and a fraud. He went to the press, he talked, and he was killed. They swept it all under the rug. The coroner's inquest technicalities are sealed forever, pretty much, because they lie. It's obvious they murdered him. Make no mistake about it. This chap who was working on similar top secret things went out for a walk as well. Same thing happened. He is found dead. They say it's suicide. So of course we can't really prove a whole lot, but at least what we did is in our walking trails of Porton Down is just talk about it tongue-in-cheek a little bit with the old Teddy Bear's Picnic song. Don't go out in the woods today. If you go out in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. If you go out in the woods today, you better go in disguise. If you go out in the woods today, you better not go alone. Don't go out in the woods today. It's safer to stay at home. For today's the day. The teddy bears have their picnic. This is an editorial cartoon of the Kelly incident with, number 10 Downing Street being the monsters that are going to ambush him. It's very, very important as someone who has to deal with incidents like this that you understand what you're up against, the ultimate evil. You have to think very, very clearly on the fact that you are working with evil. So I put in one of these ambush diagrams just to show you it doesn't hurt to learn how to do an ambush, I guess, in case you're ever led into one, that they have kill zones and you just naturally walk into a place. They have ways to trap you when you try to escape. They're waiting in backup kill zones and all that. Those are things to know, small unit tactics. Wouldn't hurt you to study some of that stuff so you never get burned. But what did this guy know? That's going to be the hard part. See, they just hide in the bushes and wait for you, and they just catch you and eat you. And then, of course, this is the teddy bear's picnic. Your body's under the tent, and all the teddy bears come out. So I'm getting to wonder if something was coming up for the Olympics, because that's the new one on the plate, that they're going to do something, and that he had technical expertise as a chemist to know what it was, how it was, didn't believe in what they were doing, doesn't fall for the false flag operations. Gareth Williams was probably the same one. In another article, they're saying that he broke codes for the Afghan log that was given to WikiLeaks. We mentioned in the last show that it might have something to do with Diana because he went to Herod's. Maybe he spilled the beans. Another man behind the scenes, same thing. Worked in the coroner's office that did the autopsy for Mr. Breitbart. We all just assume that Andrew was murdered. Just seemed too convenient. They, of course, judge that this is, some type of natural death. There's no foul play. There's no suicide. He just died. But then the man who works in the coroner's office, there could have been testing evidence from Breitbart's body, is poisoned. They make no mistake about it. He was poisoned with arsenic. Well, we haven't ruled out foul play, but it'll take 5 to 6 weeks to find out. But we don't necessarily say it couldn't have been accidental or something along that line. So Michael Cormier, the employee of the coroner's office, goes down. And then people are worried that Breitbart was working on the Obama story, that he was going to reveal fine details about the birth certificate and the fact that Sheriff Joe Arpaio was coming up with details, hard and fast evidence to prove they lied. They always lie. Everything they say is a lie. Why do you listen? Everything they say is a lie. And this chap here who was involved in the killing of Mr. Waywood in China, Bo Xilai, in this scandal, you can see why they finally brought this guy down. It wasn't so much that they murdered or were going to siphon off money or anything like that. The guy was really gutsy. He wiretapped the president of China's phone. Well, that's probably going just a little bit too far. Ho Jintao was being hacked or spied on by this guy. So they probably didn't mind you were a killer. They probably didn't mind a lot of things, but don't be tapping the president's phone. He's coming back for you. And then everything fell apart very, very quickly. Gaddafi's former oil minister found floating in the Danube. Another guy who took an early retirement, I guess. Sukri Ghanem, 69. Of course, there's no evidence of suicide. There's no evidence of homicide. They say, although a simple push to throw you in the river isn't going to really leave much in the way of marks, if any. But he worked in the regime. One of the big things we have to come up with is Sarkozy got 42 million pounds of money from Gaddafi to run for president of France. This guy was on the inside. He was prime minister of Libya for some time. He could have had a lot of knowledge of that. And then one of the little sidebar things is where he fell into the river. And that's why it's so important to go into the fine details, a lot of the things they tell you, and have a broad knowledge of some of the other crimes. But he was close to the United Nations building in the Austrian capital. And I remember looking into suspicious deaths there where people fell from great heights in the United Nations building, or people who were employees or relatives of employees fell from great heights in New York who were associated with the United Nations building. Absolutely brilliant. Then one of the bizarre stories is we had some guy, Peter Keller, bizarre doomsday cultist of some sort or another. Gets into a situation where he's killed his wife and his daughter, retreats to some sort of shelter, some sort of bunker built at Rattlesnake Trail in the forest. Kills himself down there, so they say, holding police at bay for some period of time, taking his money out of the bank. Wise move and such. But one of the biggest things that's important is don't panic. And maybe this guy thought too much is coming too fast. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't mentally stable. Who knows? The big thing is, as survival means you have to live. If you kill your wife and your daughter and shoot yourself, you haven't survived. Everything's for naught. You might as well just go along and live the fairy tale life until the end, because at least you'll be happy. There's no sense to get so involved in something that, you basically destroy everything around you. There's people that don't understand what we understand, can't figure out things that we figure out, maybe figure out easily, but that's no reason to get off the wall about it. They'll figure it out in their own good time. We'll plant the seeds. They may grow, they may not. From my own perspective, I'm not big on the preparation circuit or the survival bunker or anything like that. I look at it when shit hits the fan. You're going to need good people above ground to direct people that are going to need guidance and instruction. And as a Christian, we should be there to help our brethren understand what's going on and try to cope with it as best they can, as opposed to running off somewhere and hiding and hoarding everything that you can hoard. That makes me not much more different than the bankster as far as I'm concerned. He's hoarding all the money and causing all kinds of mayhem on the planet Earth, and on a micro scale you can hoard all kinds of stuff and run away and leave everyone holding the bag. I'd rather be putting the people in the lifeboats and getting them away to safety if I had to have an epitaph on the planet Earth, rather than running off and hiding or fighting over the last crumb of food. I think the Bible would say, and Christ would say, that we share the manna from heaven and not squander it for our own ill-gotten gains, because that's just not really very nice, and I think we could do better, much better. We're going to show a video, and you don't have to watch this one. This one's going to really challenge you emotionally, so I would suggest for people of faint hearts that you not watch. But this is, unfortunately, a fact of life. I debated this long and hard about whether I was going to show this, but somehow we have to talk about some of these issues and bring them to the table. This video is about a wounded child from Syria with a severe trauma injury to the leg. It is horrendous. You may not want to look at it. You may not even want to hear the sound. It does come with audio, and you'll hear the child cry, and it's very, very disturbing, to say the least. But many, many children are dying in a similar fashion. In fact, this was one of many, many videos that show this type of horrendous action. It's hard to wander away and go to sleep at night and just say, well, we just let it happen and we don't care. Somehow we have to stop this scourge of these wars and this fighting over money and resources and influence, or that cocaine power that our leaders so crave, because they're absolutely mad. So that's why I probably wouldn't make a good president, because I think Mr. Assad would have to duck for and cover every once in a while if crap like this was going on, and I can prove that it's going on and such like that to him, that the odd little bit of ordnance might fall in his backyard once in a while, and he might wish to do something a little better for his people. I realize there's a great broad struggle about banking and banksters, and maybe some of the banksters would have to duck and cover once in a while too, because it's just not fair that the poor and the helpless should have to be held hostage like this. And when I see that, I still look at this video, there's only 38 views on this, and I don't see the corporate media picking up the sword for justice or righteousness and screaming at the top of their lungs about why this is happening, or why at the very least we're not getting medical supplies into people in these places, or enforcing a corridor for people to escape this violence, and how hideous these leaders are to do these things. But who's going to tell you? No one talks about these things, and that's why they go on. So like I say, we'll show the video, and like I say, cover your ears or your eyes. It's only going to last about a minute and 20 some odd seconds, and then we'll go on to something different to end the show. So prepare yourselves. Yes, indeed. What man does to man. It's hard to believe how, anyone goes home at night realizing, they've committed atrocities like that. It would be hard enough just to face something like that as an accident, just to say that through some unexpected misfortune that someone received massive trauma like that, never mind a small child, and it just happened because it happened through some twist of fate. Not the fact that someone fired a firearm off or dropped ordnance on someone and massive injuries like that occurred to some sweet, poor, innocent child. Hopefully there's enough surgical skill at whatever place this child is to save the life and hopefully the limbs. Although perhaps you're probably looking at amputation in an injury that horrific with probably not the greatest medical facilities available. But these are things that we have to deal with on the planet Earth. One of the big things we have to deal with is to understand the depth and breadth of the evil and to pray for the victims who have to endure this horror and the complete lack of concern of the human race to say, we don't give a damn. So that's something about us that's a little bit different, is we do really give a damn. We don't do this for fun or profit. We do it because it's a duty that is required. Somehow we have to change the paradigm. We can only do this by changing the channel. And that's why when I see this guy like Mr. Keller, who actually shot himself and killed his family, if he would have devoted all the energy that he put into his bunker and whatever he was doing into supporting a show like Conspiracy Cafe, you would never need a bunker and you would never need arms, because we could turn the tide with knowledge, because the knowledge is the power. And we could make the world a much better place, because these people wouldn't get away with their crimes. They would be exposed to the greatest number of masses that we could muster. And of course, we have no reservations in calling on the help of the Lord upstairs to say, we'll do it. So to end on a slightly happier note, this one is the Yugoslavian space program. Turns out they were ahead in the space race, and they sold their technology to the United States in one of the bigger undercover technology transfers that's ever existed, because they lie. Everything we learned about the space program, it appears, has been a lie. What bits and pieces came from German scientists were extrapolated on by Yugoslavian scientists.
In the time of the Cold War, conquering space was a question of politics, technology, and prestige. Yuri Gagarin was sent to space, and the United States had to accept a shameful defeat and the triumph of socialism. But it's little known that socialist Yugoslavia was a third player in the race, developing its own secret space program. The Yugoslavs made rapid development based on the unknown diaries of Yugoslav space pioneer Herman Potočnik Nordung. His book, The Problem of Space Travel from 1929, served as an inspiration for further development to Werner von Braun, ex-Nazi, and later the mastermind of the American space program. But there were also other unpublished Potočnik diaries hiding new and unknown brilliant technical ideas. The CIA could not find these documents, but in 1947, the Yugoslav Secret Service, by order of President Tito, did. The technical solutions described in these papers were the basis for establishing a secret Yugoslav space program in 1948, after Tito's conflict with Stalin. In late 1960, the CIA discovered that Yugoslavia already had operational spaceflight technology. Yugoslavia secretly sold its complete space program to the U.S. in March 1961. In May 1961, Kennedy announced that the U.S. had chosen to go to the moon.
President Kennedy welcomes a man to the White House. He's receiving President Tito of Yugoslavia.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
With generous American financial support, Yugoslavia began rapid economic development. Tito traded the life of a guerrilla soldier for a luxury lifestyle.
Yugoslavia is probably the most prosperous of the communist nations, and $2.5 billion from the United States did much to prime the pump.
Ja sam morao raditi od svoje 6. godine pa do danas.
Driving around in a Cadillac, drinking expensive American whiskey, and gaining unprecedented popularity worldwide. In this documentary, we will reveal how Tito built the biggest secret underground space center in Europe. We will reveal how the US's Saturn rockets and Apollo modules were mainly made in Yugoslavia. We will reveal how Tito and his wife Jovanka were regularly visiting NASA premises and monitoring further developments.
I'd like to show you the Apollo command and service module.
Army Base Object 505 on today's Croatian-Bosnian border still holds the biggest national secret space program. After the Balkan Wars, it was partly destroyed and heavily mined. But underneath the surface, you can still find the untouched remains of the Yugoslavian space program. We will go there and reveal the hidden side of the space race. From Academy Award-nominated director Žiga Virts. Houston, we have a problem.
So that looks like a very interesting little movie that's going to come out, a little docudrama. I didn't know any of that stuff. Now I think we can see why war was so prominent in old Yugoslavia, why we had these factions set up against each other. Lots of stuff to hide that was underground. It's the way the New World Order works. They know all the information. We get snippets from various media sources, different lies that they tell us. But here we try to find some of the truths, reveal them to you to give you a bigger and broader picture so that you can discern better for yourself. We don't tell you what to think, we try to teach you how to think by giving you more information. So that way whatever information you have with a little addendum and another addendum can expand your horizons on what you do. One of the big things on the horizon, of course, is they're still trying to push for more war. And I think we can see that war is a horror. If we go and take that next step to more war, we're just going to kill a lot more innocent people, including babies, and make them suffer horribly, and that's just not the right thing to do. We have to do everything humanly possible to avoid these wars. One of the biggest things is we have to stop listening to the lies and try starting to tell the truth, as Christ said, because the truth sets us free and takes us away from these wars. One day it's one's child and another's child and another child. One day it could be your child. Stop the wars. Tell the truth. Best way to do it, change the channel. Don't give the corporate Borg your money. Send some my way. I can make good use out of it. We'll do our best. We always will. We always try, because it's the lives of the poor, the weak, and the vulnerable that are at stake. We have the knowledge, we have the duty and the responsibility to share that knowledge, to share whatever truths we can find to make it a better end run for all of us. It's the only way. And that's why you're at Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. This is that channel. We'll be back Tuesday for a live shooting, and hopefully have it posted for Thursday if you miss it. And don't forget, this show is extended, so if it doesn't jive into the hour little wedgie we get, watch it on the podcast or the video player and get the whole full effect of what we had to say tonight and every night. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you Tuesday. Good night.